The fire is out, but the heat is still on. Congresswoman Nita Lowey is now calling for a full federal investigation of the transformer fire that broke out at Indian Point Saturday. That fire shut down one of the nuclear plant's reactors and leaked thousands of gallons of oil and foam into the Hudson River. Plant operator Entergy issued this statement about the situation, quote, "We take our commitment to the environment seriously, and any potential spill of transformer oil into the environment is not in accordance with our standards." A short time ago, I spoke with Paul Gallet, who is the president and riverkeeper of the environmental group Riverkeeper, about the situation in Indian Point. Now, you've been opposed to Indian Point, you and your group, Riverkeeper, for a long time. You were opposed to it before last weekend's fire and oil and foam release into the Hudson. I'm imagining you're opposed to it now. What have we learned from that incident that's important for people to know going forward?
Well, this is the third transformer explosion and fire in the last 8 years, and the transformer that blew up wasn't even that old. And you have to ask yourself at a certain point, how many more accidents is it going to take before one of them is more serious, even than this one, which involved a significant spill of oil into the Hudson?
Now, it seems like from an Indian Point procedural standpoint, I mean, the fire, the explosion was bad, but from a what happens after that standpoint, it seems like everything went pretty well. I mean, there wasn't a radiation leak. There was a safe shutdown of the reactor. The fire went out. If anything went wrong from Entergy's standpoint, it's that some of the stuff made it into the river. Is that a fair assessment of what happened from Entergy's standpoint? And how bad is that if that's everything going fairly well for Entergy?
Listen, the fire went out, and then when it caught again, so it had to be put out a second time. There's so many fire safety exemptions at Indian Point that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission can't even count them up and tell us how many there are. Nita Lowey had to write to the NRC and say, how many exemptions have you given this plant? And you need to justify them. So at some point, a fire is going to get out of control. The cables are insulated with so little protection that they don't even meet the standard of an hour for the insulation to burn through. There's only 24 minutes of time before a fire would eat through those cables and jeopardize the core of the reactor.
And that's the exemption that Entergy has gotten that you've said multiple times?
That's one of probably over 100 exemptions. That's an estimate that the NRC gave when they were asked at a public meeting. Why is a nuclear power plant getting exemptions from fire safety regs that you couldn't get in your home?
Guys, this one feels pretty, I mean, look, this is bad because there was a fire and there was a spill into the Hudson River, and that's always bad. There's something about this one that feels particularly bad in that is it a game changer?
You're peeling the skin off the onion, and you're taking a look deep in the heart of the regulatory problem. Put aside Entergy and what they do and say. Here's an agency of the United States government that's been issuing secret exemptions to fire safety rules. No one knows what they are. So the question of whether this finally becomes the turning point, which mobilizes public opinion to say enough already, we'll know that later. But for now, it's causing a kind of scrutiny that normally hasn't occurred.
You've been on this for a long time, since your days back in the assembly, back when we first learned how to split the atom. Is your concern here that it's the health hazard, the potential catastrophic hazard to the region? That you just talked about the oversight from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission?
The Indian Point is, if you will, and let me finish the sentence, relatively safe. It's not going to blow up tomorrow. It's, 99%. The problem is that if you're wrong, if that 1% does occur, the consequences are so catastrophic as to be world history making. The benefits, whatever they are, and I don't think there are many of them, are simply not worth the risk. It's too close to New York City. You can't evacuate. The fire safety exemptions are rampant.
That's, by the way, we're looking at the map that shows 10 miles is the inner ring, 25 miles, and then 50 miles away from Indian Point. So if you're within the sound of my voice, you're probably inside that outer circle, and that means that's how close you are to Indian Point. Bill, it seems like for a long time the argument for Indian Point has been fiscal, that it helps the economy because it gives us cheap electricity, and that we need the electric power. Mm-hmm. Are either one of those still worth the risk at this point? I mean, we're going to have more on this in the coming days, but
no, I think that's right. That's pretty much the. I don't think anybody particularly cares where their energy comes from. And I think, I mean, I've been a supporter of Indian Point because I turned on the light and I want it to go on, and it's worked for a long time. I think in this case, there was something that really was disturbing in the wake of this. One of the spokespeople from Entergy said that he didn't know why, or they don't know why these transformers keep burning. And that's a real issue. And I think Congresswoman Lowey is right to make her call. Now, I can support Indian Point, but when you have any nuclear facility, especially one this close to a huge population center, every possible question needs to get asked. And I think it's absolutely appropriate. They need to answer them.
Aren't we just looking at like the least bad option when it comes to energy and how we get our energy? I mean, this is not that dissimilar from the conversation we've had about fracking, which is, would provide cheap energy and lower the cost of energy, but something goes wrong and all of a sudden it's in your groundwater and that's forever. I mean, it feels like when you're dealing with energy production, it's just a matter of picking the least deadly poison.
I think that's true. The problem with Indian Point is that even the NRC admits that Indian Point could not get licensed today. It doesn't. It's not designed. It's not situated. It's not operated in ways that are consistent with the NRC's own standards. When you have that kind of add-on, I just hope everybody else is right. And it's happened before, but geez, it's just not worth the risk.
I tell you what, guys, let's talk more about Indian Point. And in fact, that's exactly what we're going to do. More talk about Indian Point on my weekend show, Newsbreakers, which airs on FiOS 1 Lower Hudson Valley. It's the guy in the suspenders, and I can't identify the two people behind him up on your screen.
One Ranger fan.
They'll be a part of that conversation. And tomorrow night, right here on RFL, we'll speak to Mike Twomey, who is the president of External Affairs for Entergy. That'll also be a part of Newsbreakers, and we'll get a sense of what the company's take is following last weekend's accident/fire/spill. Up next, John Flanagan just replaced Dean Skelos as Senate Majority Leader, and already there's a dicey ethical question about Flanagan. Same thing when Carl Hastie replaced Sheldon Silver as Assembly Speaker. Richard, you're going to love this. Can't Albany do any better? That's our question next.